In global rankings, Australia consistently scores near the top for quality of life, clean air, good healthcare, political stability. But there's a catch. That same country now ranks among the most expensive places in the world to live. Why has one of the most resource-rich, developed nations on the planet, blessed with space, sunshine, and stability, become one of the least affordable countries for its own citizens? Sydney and Melbourne are now luxury zones for many, while even smaller towns like Ballina and Byron Bay boast real estate prices that rival San Francisco. Median rents are surging past $750 a week in capital cities. Groceries, insurance, electricity, every staple of daily life is inflating faster than wages. This isn't a temporary spike. This is the result of deep, structural decisions, economic policies, tax incentives, global pressures, and political trade-offs, decades in the making. So how did it come to this? Today, we're going to unpack that. Not just the symptoms, but the systemic forces driving them. This isn't just about numbers, it's about a generational shift, about expectations broken and futures postponed, about how prosperity, when poorly managed, can turn into a paradox. Because Australia isn't just expensive, it's becoming insanely expensive, and unless we understand why, we're only going to make it worse. Let's dive in. Beginning with the numbers, the hard, unignorable evidence of a crisis hiding in plain sight. In 2024, Australia ranked third globally for cost of living, just behind Switzerland and Singapore, according to the Numbeo Cost of Living Index. And when it comes to cities, Sydney and Melbourne are now permanent fixtures on The Economist's worldwide cost of living list, routinely outpricing global giants like London, Paris, and Los Angeles. But this affordability crisis isn't confined to the urban elite. Regional towns, once a refuge for affordability, have been swept into the storm. Byron Bay and Ballina, once sleepy coastal communities, now have median house prices above $1.5 million, overtaking parts of Sydney's inner west. That's not a luxury market. That's a basic family home. Meanwhile, the average weekly grocery bill for a family of four has surged beyond $350, driven by rising logistics costs, supermarket consolidation, and global supply pressures. Fuel, electricity, insurance, every line item in the average household budget has crept upward. And yet, wages? They've stood still. Real wage growth in Australia has essentially flatlined since 2013. In simple terms, most people are earning the same amount of money they did a decade ago, while everything around them costs significantly more. This is not inflation. It's structural suffocation. How did Australia, once a beacon of middle-class security, morph into a place where survival feels like success? Let's unpack how we got here. To truly understand Australia's affordability crisis, we have to start where the story hits hardest. Housing, the cornerstone of the Australian dream, and increasingly, its downfall. For generations, owning a home in Australia was considered a rite of passage. It wasn't just a financial goal, it was a social expectation, a reward for hard work, stability, and a ticket to middle-class security. But beginning in the late 1990s, that dream began to morph. A potent mix of financial deregulation, persistently low interest rates, and generous tax concessions transformed the housing market into something else entirely: an investment class. Fast forward to 2024, and the transformation is undeniable. The median house price in Sydney now exceeds $1.6 million. In Melbourne, it's around $1.2 million. Even Hobart, once a byword for affordability, has crossed the $750,000 line. For younger Australians and renters, the housing ladder no longer has a first rung. But here's the crucial point. It's not just a housing market anymore. It's a financial product. Two policies lie at the heart of this shift: negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount. Negative gearing, introduced in its modern form in the 1980s, allows investors to deduct losses on rental properties from their taxable income. Then came the CGT discount in 1999, which halved the tax payable on capital gains for assets held over a year. Together, these policies created a powerful incentive: buy property, make a paper loss on rent, and still come out ahead on tax and long-term capital growth. By 2023, nearly 1 in 5 taxpayers in Australia owned at least one investment property. In effect, the system began rewarding those who already owned property and sidelining those trying to get in. And while investor demand surged, housing supply remained choked. Restrictive zoning laws, Local opposition to higher density housing and drawn-out planning approvals meant new housing couldn't keep pace with population growth. The result? Prices didn't just rise, they soared. So housing in Australia stopped being about shelter. It became a speculative asset, a wealth escalator for the well-positioned, and a permanent barrier for everyone else. It made some Australians very rich, and it left many more staring through the glass. Now let's zoom out. Australia is not an isolated island when it comes to economics. It's a deeply connected node in the global financial system. The country's wealth is tightly linked to global trade. Iron ore to China, natural gas to Japan, education and tourism to the world, and critically, real estate to international capital. In the 2010s, as China liberalized its capital controls, a wave of wealth began flowing outward, and Australia was an attractive destination. Political stability, a strong legal system, a relatively transparent property market, and steady capital growth made cities like Sydney and Melbourne global safe havens for property investment. By 2016, Chinese investors alone spent over $32 billion on Australian real estate, much of it concentrated in new apartments and high-end suburban homes. Other countries followed, but China led the wave. Now, to be clear, foreign investment didn't cause the affordability crisis, but it unquestionably accelerated it. In markets already strained by domestic speculation, tight supply, and lax regulation, this influx of offshore money added pressure. Prices rose further, especially in gateway cities, and first-time local buyers found themselves competing not just with wealthier Australians, but with global capital. It was, in effect, fuel added to a fire already burning. But housing is just one part of the story. As Australia's population grew, up from 19 million in 2000 to over 26 million in 2024, infrastructure did not keep pace. Public transport networks remain woefully underfunded in many cities. Roads are congested, regional areas lack hospitals and reliable broadband, and when services lag behind, livability declines, and costs rise. Take childcare. In major cities, families spend between $100 and $180 per day per child, making Australia one of the most expensive countries in the OECD for early childhood education, or electricity. Despite being rich in solar, wind, and gas, Australians pay among the highest electricity prices in the developed world, averaging 30 cents per kilowatt hour, more than double the US average. Why? A legacy of privatization, mismanagement, and underinvestment in the national grid. Another critical layer in Australia's affordability crisis is its two-speed economy, a structural imbalance that has shaped the country's economic trajectory for 2 decades. During the China-led commodities supercycle from 2003 to 2013, mining-heavy states like Western Australia and Queensland experienced unprecedented booms. High global demand for iron ore, coal, and gas triggered massive investment, job creation, and wage growth in these regions. At the same time, states more reliant on manufacturing, education, or services, like Victoria and South Australia, lagged behind. The result was a fractured national economy, rapid growth in some areas, stagnation in others. And when the mining boom inevitably cooled, the cracks became harder to ignore. To maintain growth, the federal government pivoted toward population expansion, using migration as an economic lever. By 2023, net overseas migration hit 518,000, a record-breaking figure. Migrants bring skills, start businesses, and fill critical labor shortages. They are not the problem. In fact, they're a key part of Australia's success story. But growth without planning is pressure. Without proportional investment in housing, infrastructure, and essential services, that surge in population puts massive strain on urban systems. The outcome? Skyrocketing demand for housing, overwhelmed transport networks, stressed hospitals and schools, and ultimately rising rents and deeper inequality. Rents in Australia are now reaching record highs. In 2024, the median weekly rent in Sydney surpassed $750, while in Perth and Brisbane, it's not uncommon to see 30 to 40 applicants per rental. Australia's rental market is uniquely volatile due to its reliance on mum-and-dad landlords, individual investors who may own 1 or 2 properties. This leads to low security of tenure, inconsistent rental standards, and highly cyclical pricing. And because Australia lacks a large-scale public or social housing sector, With only 3.8% of total housing stock being public housing, the private market has unchecked power. With wages stagnant, renters are now spending more than 35% of their income on housing, crossing the affordability threshold. Let's shift to something we all feel: the price of food. Australia is home to a duopoly in the grocery sector. Coles and Woolworths control over 65% of the market. This lack of competition has led to price gouging, especially during times of supply disruption. In 2023, food inflation peaked at 8.5%, the highest in 30 years. The price of fresh produce, dairy, and meat skyrocketed. And while global inflation played a role, the ACCC found that supermarket profit margins also grew. So consumers were paying more, but not because of rising costs alone, because of market power. It's not just groceries. Australia also has one of the most concentrated economies in the developed world. 4 big banks, 2 major airlines, and a handful of telecom giants. Less competition means less pricing pressure. The result? Australians pay more for everything from mobile data to car insurance. Government policies have not just failed to fix the affordability crisis, they've often made it worse. The first home buyer schemes, for instance, while well-intentioned, often lead to price inflation, as extra demand meets the same supply. Meanwhile, tax concessions like negative gearing and the CGT discount disproportionately benefit higher-income earners and do little to promote affordability. Add to that the GST on new builds, but not existing homes, and a planning system riddled with red tape, and you have a government framework that protects existing homeowners but leaves renters and first-time buyers behind. Living in an insanely expensive country carries far more than just financial costs. It takes a profound psychological and social toll. Young Australians are delaying or abandoning life milestones that previous generations took for granted, moving out of the family home, buying property, starting a family. What was once a natural progression now feels like an impossible luxury. The mental strain is mounting. A 2023 survey by Beyond Blue revealed that 1 in 3 Australians cite cost of living pressures as a major source of anxiety. It's no longer just about budgeting. It's about survival. Meanwhile, household debt has ballooned. On average, Australians now owe 190% of their disposable income, placing them among the most indebted populations on Earth. People aren't thriving. They're treading water, often one missed paycheck away from crisis. In many ways, the dream of prosperity has been replaced by a race for survival, with financial stress bleeding into every aspect of daily life. So, how do we fix this? It starts with policy courage, the willingness to challenge entrenched interests and rethink assumptions that no longer serve the public good. That means reforming the tax system by phasing out negative gearing, rethinking how we treat capital gains, and introducing more equitable land taxation that discourages speculative hoarding. It means tackling the housing shortage at its root. We need to cut planning red tape, invest seriously in social and affordable housing, and embrace medium-density developments in our urban cores, not just endless sprawl. We must take on powerful corporate interests. That means breaking up monopolies, encouraging new market entrants, and regulating anti-competitive pricing practices, especially in sectors like supermarkets, banking, and construction. Our infrastructure must keep pace with our population. From transport to energy to digital networks, we need to build the backbone that supports sustainable, equitable growth. And we must reignite wage growth, not just through short-term fixes, but through fairer labor laws, robust skills training, and a rebalancing of power between capital and labor. But more than policy, it requires a shift in mindset. Australia must stop treating housing as an investment class and start recognizing it as a fundamental human right. It must stop leaning on population growth as a quick fix for GDP and start building an economy that actually works for the people who already live here. Because in the end, what's the point of having world-class beaches, stunning cities, and abundant resources if everyday Australians can't afford to live a decent life among them? Australia didn't become insanely expensive by accident. It was the result of decades of decisions, some strategic, some short-sighted, many with unintended consequences. The challenge now is to rewrite that story, to recognize that affordability isn't just a number. It's about dignity, opportunity, and the ability to dream. It's about making sure that Australia isn't just a rich country, but one where everyone can thrive. Thanks for watching.